The Conjuring.
Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are taking a look at The Conjuring: Last Rites, which is the latest installment in the Conjuring universe. Now, The Conjuring is one of those movies where, either you're a huge fan of horror or you're just meh. And the universe is basically centered around Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are paranormal investigators of the 20th century, who were infamous for investigating all these cases that people either called BS on or became true believers in the paranormal. Some of the most famous ones would include the Amityville House, the weird witch's house in New England that was the subject of the first Conjuring movie, and the house in London where we were introduced to the nun for the very first time. Now, Lee, in terms of your viewing experience, how much exposure have you had with the Conjuring movies?
That's a great question. I've seen the trailers.
You've seen the have you ever caught a glimpse of any of these movies, like The Conjuring or Annabelle or The Nun or anything?
Yes, I have seen bits and pieces of them over time.
What have been your thoughts on them?
I'm willing to watch this trailer if you can name numerically how many films are in this universe right now.
Are we also including spin-offs? Or just Conjuring movies?
No, we'll just stick with the main movies. If you could tell me how many exist in this universe, I will watch the stupid trailer.
But we're gonna watch it either way. I mean, technically, this will be the fourth, right? Because
there's only been four.
Yeah, because you got the first one, and you got the Conjuring 2, and then you got Devil Made Me Do It, which is the third, and then this is the fourth. And then if you include Annabelle, it's 7, and if you include the Nun, it's 9. And then I guess if you want to include La Llorona, that would be 10, but that's kind of stretching it a bit.
Oh, okay. That was very well done. Thank you for doing all that.
Don't touch anything. Everything you see in here is either haunted.
I've seen
Conjuring 2 before. The Nun.
Or been used in some sort of ritualistic practice.
The Samurai.
Nothing's a toy.
Up there's Annabelle.
Not even the toys.
How many cases you guys had?
Cases?
My name is Ed Warren, here with my wife Lorraine.
Maybe 1,000.
That's a lot of cases.
Yeah, like, geez, how could there be that much paranormal stuff going on?
Well, they started since the 50s and all the way up to the 2000s.
Once we start, there's no going back. Anything can happen.
Maybe just did a setup. What's the problem? Okay, now the big. Oh, okay, now there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Something's changed. Something's different.
Is this like a crossover?
I think it's more like a culmination.
That's on the Holy Spirit. We cast you out. By the power of our Lord Jesus Christ.
I'm gonna have to figure out if this is really the last case, and that's actually the case, and that's what makes it put up the movie. My name is Zool. Okay.
All right, we got through it, Lee. You can breathe easy now. Now, as Ed Warren may or may not have admitted, they've solved they've handled thousands of paranormal cases, which is why when you think of paranormal investigation, those two come up quite a lot in conversation. But I was gonna say, like, can you imagine how much content, how many movies they could continue to keep making just based on those cases? I'll tell you this, I'm genuinely shocked they never tried to make a movie about the Amityville house, because that's one of their more famous cases, is them investigating the house after the whole, incident there in the 70s, and and I remember asking you this several years ago, but didn't you say that, was it you or your uncle who lived not too far from the Amityville house on
So
Long Island?
we've gone by it. I don't recall if anyone actually lived close by, but I know it's out on Long Island, and certainly like family knows about it and
Yeah.
driven by it before. So definitely some interesting things there with that. But yeah, I mean, and to answer your question too, like, I mean, think about how many times the Amityville horror has been redone, right? Like, there's so many of those films. I wonder if it's just because, other people thought like, hey, we're gonna do this instead, because God, there's been so many of that, whether it's like books or films.
But to be fair, like, most of the Amityville movies that came out were in the 70s and 80s, right? Because because it was during that time period where that case still would have been fresh in everyone's mind, right? So
yes, there's also looks like a lot of direct-to-video nonsense that came out in the teens, because I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Oh my God, there's 14 films from 2010 to 2020 that reference Amityville.
Oh, that was only 10. That was only 5 years ago, Lee. Come on.
That's wild. That's wild to think about how many things. But yeah, I'd imagine that the market is a little bit saturated on it at the moment.
Well, another thing too, because I mean, at some point you kind of have to say, well, I think we've made enough of these. I think we can kind of just sit back a little bit and kind of rest on our laurels, because keep in mind, I mean, when the first Conjuring movie came out and everyone was touting about, oh, this, these guys are going to be the next MCU of the horror genre, everybody was kind of excited about that. And then flash forward to today, where people are kind of just scratching their heads and thinking, oh, they're still making these. I mean that is the curse of the MCU, really. It's the fact that they've created this interconnected universe where not only do you have movies that kind of connect in some way with with the same cast and the same characters, but you also have to deal with the fact that you've got all these spin-offs and a need to continue to make movies to kind of expand the universe. And Marvel's kind of become the victim of its own success, because now they're churning out movies and TV shows that that people have lost count with. Whereas I'm hoping with the Conjuring Last Rites, they kind of decide, what, I think this might be the last one. I think we can finally move on, with our lives. Patrick Wilson, you were great. Vera Farmiga, phenomenal. But I think it's time that we all kind of just move on to the next thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm obviously all for that, because I quite frankly can't believe that they've managed to do as many as they had. So I guess there's a bigger audience out there than I would ever expect. So I guess props to, people that, enjoy these films, right? And absolutely no shade against anything like that. People like what they like. I'm sure many people watch stuff that we do and wonder why we don't like something, or wonder why we like something. So I totally get it. I could just safely say this is absolutely a franchise I have no interest in.
Yeah, because well, I mean, you said yourself you're not really a fan of the genre, overall. So it's not like you're missing much in terms of your viewing experience.
And I would say it's not even necessarily genre. I think it's just a matter of like how it's presented, right? So I think back, we recently watched the Fall of the House of Usher, right?
Right.
So we had we watched part. I mean,
I finished watching it the day the following day. So
yeah, because we've watched, so I watched it beforehand too. So like something like that I think is obviously like horror, or at least horror adjacent. To me, I could really get into, right? Because I think like I like the characters, like the writing. There's just a lot of those types of things that I enjoy. And I think they're able to do a lot with that type of genre with what they have. And then like
Yeah.
I'm looking at something like this, where, like I said, my biggest complaint, right? And like I said, it might be a little bit, I might be exaggerating somewhat with it, but it just feels like all it is just like, hey, cool, like we're gonna scare you, but it's only gonna be via jump scares, right? That's all it is. It's all just like, hey, cool, we're gonna play, creepy doll's gonna do a sit up, and then like, oh, you see the little doll in the background, and then it's, oh, we're gonna, have this, stupid thing, and then you're gonna like turn the volume up and do blah, blah, blah. It's always just the same like tired thing for me, that I think that's why I just never really cared or got into this stuff, because I've definitely seen at least some of the films, right? I couldn't name them off the top of my head because I just frankly could not tell you the difference between any of them.
Yeah, they
But
kind of blend together. You know?
yes. So for me, that's always the issue, is that I think that the horror genre absolutely has good things out there, but this to me is not how you do it, or this is not how at least you get people like myself involved in it, is by kind of just doing all these cheap tactics when there's, definitely ways to create like tension and atmosphere and everything like that, without it being, too over the top. To bring up like something like Alien, right? Like it's kind of a, you blend this horror and sci-fi, and you do it really well to get people engaged. Whereas, this is just like, oh, spooky ghost pops up out of nowhere nonsense.
Well, to go back to the point I made earlier about The Conjuring becoming the MC of the horror genre, what I find it kind of irritating is the fact that, the first movie was pretty decent, but then when you start making more and more movies that are interconnected, there's almost this unspoken rule that you kind of have to watch all these movies in order to get what's going on in this movie, right? So,
Yes.
So for The Nun, for instance, you would have to be familiar with what happened in Conjuring 2 in order to get the full context, or I don't know, you would have to know what happened in Annabelle and Annabelle Comes Home to understand what's going on with The Devil Made Me Do It, for instance. So that kind of pisses me off a little bit, because I feel like if I'm watching a horror movie, I just want to enjoy it on its own merit. I don't want to have to go and watch all these other movies and understand the references that are being made in order to fully appreciate what's going on here.
Absolutely.
But it is what it is. They found something that works for them, and it doesn't gel with us personally. But hey, we're not really purveyors of the paranormal. We're just two guys doing a podcast about movies. But let us know down in the comments below what your thoughts are. Are you sad to see Conjuring Last Rites? Do you think this might be the last one, or do you think James Wan might have it in him to give us another 999 movies based on the numerous cases of the Warrens? But remember to like, comment, subscribe. It definitely helps with the algorithm. We're trying to grow our channel, so any amount of support that you can offer us, we would definitely appreciate. And as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.